Hey, what's up guys? So in this video I want to talk about the long-awaited firmware update that recently came out a couple weeks ago for the new Redenso detectors. The Redensos, especially the Redenso Pro SE, you've got your high-end performance right up there with the Redline. It's one of the very best performing windshield mount radar detectors that you can get. Plus it's got the GPS chip built in, so in addition to the long-range performance, you've also got the good stuff in the city, like the GPS lockouts, the low-speed muting, red light camera alerts as well. So it's a really well-performing detector that's good for highway and city drivers. Now, the issue up to this point is that some of the features, really critical features like the GPS lockouts and a frequency display, etc., actually haven't been working properly. So while the detector has a lot of promise and potential, it's not yet living up to its expectations, and it's for that reason that people have been really excitedly awaiting this updated firmware that's going to be released for the Redensos, right? Well, this firmware was released about 5 weeks ago or so, and the idea was it was a complete re-implementation of the GPS lockouts. Before, with the old version, with US9, the lockouts actually didn't work that well, and so they completely scrapped their GPS lockouts, and they rebuilt the entire thing from scratch. That was US13. That came out about 5 weeks ago or so. I'll actually, in the video description, put a link to where you can read about, all of the different changes that US13 brought about. There were a number of different changes with features removed and added and updates and so forth, but lockouts is the primary thing that the firmware update was designed to address. Now, based on a lot of our feedback, like people like myself and other people on the forum actually running the firmware, giving our feedback as far as our experiences, maybe ideas and suggestions for improvements. About 4 weeks later, they came out with an updated version of the firmware, US14. And that came out about a week ago, actually. And since then, I've actually been driving around with the latest version of the firmware, US14. And in this video, I just kind of want to share my general impressions of the GPS lockouts. Like I said, this is something that people have been waiting for a while now, and I'm really glad to see that it's finally come out. In short, it's a completely different implementation of GPS lockouts, and it's definitely an improvement over the previous implementation of lockouts, but it's still not there yet. There's still some weird quirks as far as the lockouts, where you lock out a signal and it keeps beeping at you. I'm not entirely sure why this is the case. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with the lockouts, but they seem a little bit weird. In the changelog that they posted on the forums for both US13 and US14, they actually explain a little bit about how the lockouts work. There's a 30 megahertz range that the lockout covers. They don't give the exact GPS radius, but there's some things like where when you lock out a signal, it only locks out up to 2 signals at a time. So if you're seeing a bunch of signals, like driving down the street, you may actually have to lock out that same drive a couple of times until you get everything, So there's some weird stuff that's going on, but even reading over how they've implemented the lockouts, there's still some weird stuff that happens where, like, you lock out a signal and it even shows on the display that the false alert is locked out, but the detector keeps beeping and alerting at you anyways. So I don't fully understand what's going on. It just seems weird. Again, it's a combination of some of the logic that they've chosen on, which I don't fully understand, plus just some bugs that still seem to be the case. So I was hoping that this firmware update would be the final solution to finally give us this like ultimate detector with like the performance of the Redline with the crazy long range, plus a lot of the filtering capabilities of the Max with the lockouts and the red light camera alerts and all that kind of stuff to give us a really good, high performing, yet still very well-rounded detector. But unfortunately, that's still not the case. I actually shot this video a couple times, and it goes on for like 20 minutes because I go into all the discussion and detail about how the lockouts work. In short, there's some stuff like where, again, I mentioned only locks out 2 signals at a time, so you may have to keep driving down the road over and over and over and over and over, telling it to keep locking out the signal until it finally does it. So it's kind of annoying in practice. I would like to see it, you press lockout and it just learns everything, and then voila, you're done, and then it's locked out forevermore, but that's not the case. So there's still some weird stuff going on with that. There's some stuff that I like that they've done where it remembers not only the location and the frequency of the signal, but also the strength of the signal, which is nice. So let's say it's locked out a really weak grocery store on the side of the road and you drive by. Now let's say there's a cop that's shooting you with instant on in the same location. He's in the same location, and maybe he has a very similar frequency signal, which with other implementation of lockouts can actually lead to locking out the police officer, right? So if it sees maybe a signal that's way stronger than it's seen previously, it'll actually alert you to that. So it sounds really cool in theory, and I tested it. I can go through a lockout zone and it's quiet, and then I'll trigger, another K-band alert, and all of a sudden the detector goes off, which is great. I like that. The issue is that can also lead to your locking outs not actually sticking. A perfect example is a speed sign. Let's say the speed sign is actually shooting this direction and you're driving the same direction. You're going to be picking it up pretty weak, right? Because it's shooting away from you and you're driving past it, now it's behind you, so you're going to pick it up, but it's going to be pretty weak. Now if you turn around and drive into the speed sign where the speed sign is shooting directly at you, you're going to be picking up a much stronger signal, so that lockout going one direction may not work coming back the other direction, so you may have to actually lock it out a second time in order to actually have it be fully locked out. That said, I've seen some weird stuff where I go back by a speed sign and it pegs out my detector full tilt, and yet I come back the other direction and it's still alerting again anyways, and so this whole strength-based stuff doesn't seem to actually be the solution. So, like I said, there's some new logic that's been implemented, but even understanding some of the details of the new logic, there's still some weird stuff where lockouts don't stick. There'll be times when it shows that it's locked out, but it's alerting anyways, etc. So I don't fully get what's going on. The way that it works with the lockout learning process is you've got two buttons here, well, three buttons on top. Two of them are designed to be used for your lockouts. If you take a look here, the button here on the left, when you press that, that's your mute button. So you press that button and it'll go ahead and mute your signals for you, whether it's a K-band false or a red light camera alert. You can actually mute either one of them, which is nice. We used to not be able to mute red light camera alerts. Now we can, yay. Anyways, press this button to mute. If you want to lock out a signal, what you do is you press this button here and you hold it for about 2 or 3 seconds. When you do that, you'll actually see on the display that it says it's going to initiate the lockout learning process. Drive down the street, it sees the signal for however long you see the signal, and then once you lose it, it completes the lockout learning process, and now your lockout has been successfully learned, and it's pretty cool. That works. There's some issues with that too, where sometimes it'll actually finish learning too quickly. If you're stuck in traffic, you know, a car in front of you can actually block the signal and it can cause you to lose that signal. If that happens, then your lockout may end prematurely and then you start moving again. There's more space between you and the car in front of you, and all of a sudden you get that false alert again. So you have to restart the lockout process. So there's some weird quirks to it. I'm honestly not a big fan of the new implementation of the lockouts either. I think it's an improvement considering you can lock out the falses and eventually in some locations it will mute the signal. Talking to people in the forums, some people are experiencing where you drive around and lock it out and eventually it will fully mute your locations. However, that's not the case for everybody. In fact, most people are having the same experience I'm having where you can lock it out a bunch of times, but it still will not properly lock it out. I think, again, it's a combination of bugs and or some logic that still needs to be tweaked and improved to really do what it is that they want to do. So in short, I was really hoping that this firmware update would finally be the solution that we were hoping for, you know, to give us really good, effective lockouts in a detector that also has long range, really good performance. Unfortunately, that's still not the case yet, but Redenso is really good. They're continuing to work on some things. They're going to be changing the voice announcements, the way those work. There's going to be improvements coming to that. I hope they can fix the frequency display. Apparently there's some issues with temperature fluctuations where when you turn on the detector and power it up, it heats up, which means that it's not able to accurately determine the frequency the entire time as it's heating up and warming up. So that's one of the reasons they haven't been able to do an accurate frequency display, which fine, cool, okay, but everybody else can do it. So even though I understand it, Escort can do it accurately, Beltronics, Uniden, Stinger, Valentine, everybody else is doing it. So I get some of the explanations, but I don't see it as a valid excuse considering everybody else is able to do it. So there should be a solution to it, you know? So there's still some weird quirks with the Redensos. It's not yet up to par with where I would want it to be. Again, I would love it to get to that point, but unfortunately it's not there yet. There are some workarounds you can do, things like using auto city mode, so the low speed muting in this detector is quite good. You can actually set 2 different thresholds. So like if you're traveling below a certain speed, like maybe driving around in a parking lot, it can actually mute everything for you, both audibly and visually. So you can actually get a really quiet detector without having to rely on the lockouts, which is kind of nice if the lockouts aren't working. So it works pretty well in practice. But for myself, I like to know what's going on around me, even if I haven't gotten on the road yet. I like to know if there's a cop shooting radar if I'm pulling out of the parking lot. And with low speed muting, I don't have that ability. So I prefer increased situational awareness and not just nuking all signals, you know? So I prefer running with lockouts versus just nuking everything. Now, There's an additional level of low-speed muting you can do where once you cross over the first threshold, it will visually display any signals that you're getting, and it'll show you there's a new signal, but it'll still audibly mute it for you, which is nice. So rather than just visually nuking everything, it'll just auto-mute, but still visually alert you. So you've got different tiers of low-speed muting. At low speed, you can even dial back the sensitivity to filter out some weak K-band alerts, which is nice if you're, again, going through a parking lot, maybe help deal with some of the grocery stores on the other end of the parking lot or whatever. So you do have some additional filtering capabilities beyond just lockouts, but lockouts are the main thing that they're focusing on with this firmware update, so that's kind of what I wanted to focus on with this video. So in short, improved, yes. Continued improvements to come, from what I understand, yes. Is it where I feel it needs to be to at least be on par with other detectors? No. It definitely still has some room for improvement. I like that they're actually really taking the lockout seriously. They're listening to us as enthusiasts and implementing our requests and suggestions. So on that note, it's great. Again, the detector has a lot of promise, a lot of performance potential. Like my tests, when I was up in Canada a couple of weeks ago, I did a video on this. This was the best performing windshield mount radar detector that I tested. So the performance is there. There's still room for improvement with some of the features as far as the frequency display, the voice announcements, the lockouts, etc. It's not perfect. Then again, every radar detector has its quirks and issues. Nothing is totally perfect. I'm still on the hunt for the ideal, perfect, ultimate radar detector, like the one radar detector to rule them all. This has the potential to be that, as do a couple other detectors, like maybe the Max 360 or the V1 with YaV1 or V1 driver, or the Stinger VIP. Like, there's a lot of really good detectors out there, but everything still has its share of quirks and little weird nuances, so everything has room for improvement, right? I wish there was like one ultimate detector. Fortunately, that's not the case yet. But with the Redenso, at least they're still actively developing it. I like to see what's going on with it. I'm glad to see that it's being improved. I was really hoping that this firmware update would be the solution that we're hoping for, maybe in an upcoming firmware update. So anyways, for more information about all the details regarding these latest firmware updates, take a look at the links in the video descriptions, which will go over what the firmware updates entailed for both US13 and US14. There's discussion about what's to come with US15 and beyond. There's a lot of great discussion with other people who are running Redensos, myself and everybody else on the forum, sharing our experiences, what we're seeing, any quirks or issues, etc. So I would definitely recommend taking a look. There's a lot of discussion on the forum, but if you want to learn more about the detector, that's a great resource. That's where we're all discussing stuff. So if you have any questions, post there. Links in the video description. Yeah, so awesome. Thanks for watching. I hope that's been helpful, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.